Welcome back to Broadcasting Seeds, where we dig deep into the bizarre, the unexplained, and the downright strange. I'm your host, Bennett Tanton, and today we're taking a walk, or maybe a run, through the shadowy forests of North America. Why the run, you ask? Well, because today's episode is all about the Dogman, that cryptid that's said to chase down anything that dares to cross its path. And trust me, folks, you might just want to lace up those running shoes for this one. Now, if you've been hanging around this podcast for a while, you know we like to explore the fringes of what's considered normal. We've talked about Bigfoot, we've dabbled in government conspiracies, and we've even dipped our toes into the paranormal. But the Dogman? This creature is a whole different beast, literally and figuratively. Imagine a creature that stands on two legs like a human, but has the head of a snarling wolf. Sounds like something straight out of a horror movie, right? Well, there are people out there who swear they've seen it, up close and personal. And let me tell you, they didn't stick around to ask it for an autograph. Today, we're going to dive into the phenomenon of the Dogman, where it comes from, what it might be, and why it seems to be popping up in more and more eyewitness reports. We'll trace its roots from ancient legends to modern-day encounters, and we'll even compare it to another famous forest dweller you might know, our buddy Bigfoot. Is Dogman just a case of misidentification? Or is there something more sinister lurking in the woods? So, whether you're a skeptic or a true believer, stick around. Because by the end of this episode, you might just find yourself double-checking those shadows next time you're out for a late-night stroll. And if you hear a growl, well, you'll know what I'm talking about. All right, let's kick things off by turning the pages back, way back, to the origins of the Dogman legend. You know, every good story has to start somewhere, and this one's no different. Except instead of a fairy tale beginning with once upon a time, our story starts with something a bit more chilling. A long time ago, in the dark, dense forests of North America. Now, the Dogman might seem like a modern urban legend, but its roots go much deeper. In fact, tales of a man-beast with the head of a wolf or a dog can be traced back to Native American folklore. The indigenous tribes of North America had a deep respect, and sometimes fear, for the creatures of the wild. Among these creatures were the Shunka-Warakin of the Iowa tribe and the Mishibijyu, a water panther spirit with wolf-like features, from the Algonquian-speaking peoples. These weren't just stories told around the campfire. They were warnings, passed down through generations, about the dangers that lurked in the wilderness. Now, fast forward a few centuries to the arrival of European settlers. These folks brought with them their own folklore, including the tales of werewolves, humans cursed, or choosing to transform into wolves under the light of the full moon. It didn't take long for these European legends to mix and mingle with the Native American stories. And voila, you've got the perfect recipe for a cryptid cocktail, part werewolf, part spirit, all terrifying. But let's not forget the era of the pioneers, those rugged, fearless folks who decided that life wasn't hard enough already and ventured into the untamed American frontier. You see, the wilderness back then wasn't just full of wild animals. It was full of the unknown. And when you're faced with the unknown, your mind tends to play tricks on you. Every rustle in the bushes, every shadow in the trees could be something else. It's in this atmosphere of uncertainty and fear that the legend of the Dogman really starts to take shape. One of the earliest recorded mentions of a dogman-like creature comes from the late 1800s, when settlers in Michigan's Wexford County reported seeing a creature that was half man, half dog, skulking around the edges of their campsites. These stories spread like wildfire because, let's be honest, nothing travels faster than a good piece of gossip about a terrifying beast in the woods. And thus, the legend began to cement itself in the collective consciousness of the region. But here's the thing. The Dogman isn't just some regional oddity. Sightings of similar creatures have been reported across North America, from the swamps of Louisiana to the forests of the Pacific Northwest. It's as if the Dogman has always been there, lurking just beyond the firelight, watching and waiting. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Bennett, this all sounds like a bunch of tall tales. Why should we believe any of this? Well, hold on to that skepticism for a minute, because in the next section, we're going to dive into some modern-day sightings that might just make you think twice about dismissing the Dogman as mere folklore. Now that we've got the backstory out of the way, let's leap forward into the present day. You might think that the Dogman is just a relic of old folklore, a tale that's lost its bite in the modern world. But you'd be wrong, dead wrong. Because as it turns out, reports of this beast aren't just confined to the dusty pages of history. Nope, the Dogman is still making appearances, and not just in the middle of nowhere either. We're talking about sightings in places you might drive through on your way to work, or hike with your family on a weekend trip. So, let's take a look at some of the most chilling modern-day encounters that will make you want to reconsider that camping trip you've been planning. Let's start in Michigan, where the legend seems to have its strongest roots. In 1987, a local DJ named Steve Cook released a song called The Legend, which was based on reports of Dogman sightings in Michigan. Now, here's where it gets interesting. After the song aired, Cook was flooded with calls and letters from people claiming they had encountered the creature themselves. These weren't just isolated incidents. There were reports from every corner of the state, spanning decades. One particularly famous encounter happened in 1938 in Paris, Michigan. A group of loggers working in the area reported seeing a large, bipedal creature with the body of a man and the head of a dog stalking through the woods. At first, they thought it was just a bear, until it stood up on two legs and let out a growl that they swore was more like a wolf's. The loggers did what any sane person would do. They got out of there as fast as they could. But the Dogman isn't content with just hanging around the forests of Michigan. There are reports from across the country, with one of the most famous coming from the land between the lakes region in Kentucky. In the 1980s, a family on a camping trip reportedly had a terrifying encounter with a Dogman. The creature attacked their RV, leaving behind deep claw marks and a story that has haunted the region ever since. And it doesn't stop there. In 2006, a man in Wisconsin claimed he was driving home late at night when he saw something strange by the side of the road. Thinking it was a deer, he slowed down, only to realize it was no deer. The The creature had the body of a man, but the head of a wolf, and it was staring right at him with glowing eyes. He did what any of us would do, floored the gas pedal, and didn't look back. Now I know what you're thinking. These stories sound like something out of a horror movie. But here's the thing. The people who report these sightings often have nothing to gain from coming forward. Many of them are ordinary folks, hunters, farmers, hikers, who just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. They're not out for fame or fortune, they just want answers. And the fear in their voices when they recount their experiences? That's not something you can fake. And it's not just rural areas that are seeing these sightings. There have been reports in suburban neighborhoods with people claiming they've seen the Dogman lurking near their homes, staring at them from the edge of the woods. Imagine that. Looking out your window at night and seeing something like that staring back at you. Gives you chills, doesn't it? But here's the kicker. Despite the numerous reports and the sheer terror these encounters inspire, there's almost no physical evidence. No clear photos, no bodies, nothing but a few blurry footprints and claw marks. Which raises the question, what exactly are people seeing? Is it a flesh and blood creature, a figment of the imagination, or something else entirely? That's exactly what we'll dig into in the next section, where we'll pit the Dogman against another famous cryptid you've probably heard of, Sasquatch. Trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this one. Okay, so by now you're probably wondering how the Dogman stacks up against the reigning champion of North American cryptids, Sasquatch, aka Bigfoot. If these two creatures were to meet in the wild, who would come out on top? Well, let's just say this isn't your typical Bigfoot versus the Loch Ness Monster kind of debate. Instead, we're going to dive into the similarities, differences, and frankly, the downright weirdness of these two legendary beings. First up, let's talk physical appearance. Sasquatch, as you probably know, is described as a large, hairy, ape-like creature, usually standing somewhere between 7 and 9 feet tall. It's built like a linebacker with the agility of an Olympic sprinter, at least according to the stories. The Dogman, on the other hand, is also tall, but it's often described as leaner and more muscular, with a distinctly canine head. Think of it as the ultimate hybrid, part man, part dog, and all menace. While Bigfoot seems to evoke curiosity and a sort of awe, the Dogman triggers something more primal, pure, unadulterated fear. But here's where it gets interesting. Both of these creatures are often seen in similar environments: dense forests, remote areas, places where human activity is minimal. It's almost as if they prefer to stay out of sight. Or maybe they're just really good at it. However, while Sasquatch is often portrayed as shy or even benevolent, the Dogman has a reputation for being aggressive. People who encounter Bigfoot sometimes describe it as observing them from a distance, maybe even with a hint of curiosity. Dogman, on the other hand, is more likely to be described as charging or chasing after the unlucky soul who stumbles upon it. It's the difference between seeing a bear in the woods and seeing a bear in the woods that's decided you look like dinner. Now let's talk about the footprints. Sasquatch is known for leaving behind some pretty impressive tracks, big, wide, human-like prints that have kept cryptozoologists busy for decades. The Dogman, however, leaves a different kind of calling card. Witnesses often report seeing large canine-like tracks, but with one unsettling twist. They look like they were made by something walking on two legs. Picture a wolf's paw print, but stretched out and elongated, as if it's adapted for bipedal movement. Creepy, right? Another big difference lies in the cultural perceptions of these creatures. Bigfoot has, over the years, become something of a pop culture icon. There are Bigfoot festivals, TV shows, and even beef jerky commercials. He's the friendly giant of the cryptid world, a mystery wrapped in a layer of shaggy fur. Dogman, on the other hand, has a much darker reputation. There are no Dogman parades or lighthearted documentaries. Instead, the stories that circulate about this creature are tinged with horror, a sense that encountering the Dogman is more of a brush with the supernatural than a meeting with a misunderstood animal. But here's the million-dollar question. Could these two cryptids be related in some way? Some researchers have speculated that the Dogman and Sasquatch might be different branches of the same evolutionary tree, perhaps distant relatives that evolved in different directions. Others suggest that they might not be flesh and blood creatures at all, but manifestations of something else, something beyond our current understanding. After all, both cryptids seem to appear and disappear with little to no trace, almost as if they're slipping between worlds. And speaking of worlds, that brings us to one of the more out there theories, that both Sasquatch and Dogman are interdimensional beings, popping into our reality from some parallel universe. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. But in the world of cryptids and the paranormal, it's not as crazy as it might seem. If you're open to the idea of Bigfoot being a ghostly entity, or the Dogman being a demonic spirit, then the interdimensional theory isn't such a big leap. So, which is scarier? That's up for debate. But one thing's for sure. Whether you're wandering through the woods in search of Bigfoot or trying to avoid the Dogman's hunting ground, it's best to keep your eyes and your ears wide open. You never know what might be watching from the shadows. But before we get too deep into the paranormal rabbit hole, let's bring in a dose of science and skepticism. In the next section, we'll explore the possible natural explanations for the Dogman phenomenon and consider whether it's all just a case of mistaken identity, mass hysteria, or something even stranger. Let's put on our rational thinking caps and dive into some possible explanations for what people are really seeing when they claim to encounter the Dogman. Because as much as we love a good cryptid story, it's important to balance our sense of wonder with a healthy dose of skepticism. First up, let's consider the most straightforward explanation. The Dogman might just be a case of mistaken identity. It's no secret that the wilderness is home to some pretty big, pretty scary animals. Bears, wolves, coyotes, you name it. And when you're alone in the woods, especially at night, your mind can play tricks on you. A bear standing on its hind legs, combined with some low lighting and a lot of imagination, could easily be mistaken for a bipedal beast. Add in a bit of fear-induced adrenaline, and suddenly, that bear is a half-man, half-dog creature ready to chase you down. But what about those reports of the Dogman chasing after people or standing its ground? Well, animals can be unpredictable, especially when they feel threatened. A large dog or wolf might display aggressive behavior if it perceives you as a threat or if you accidentally stumble into its territory. It's not exactly cryptid behavior. It's just nature doing what nature does best. Another explanation could be the good old-fashioned trick of light and shadow. Have you ever been driving down a dark road at night and seen something out of the corner of your eye that made your heart skip a beat? Maybe it was just a tree or a signpost, but for a split second it looked like something else, something much more sinister. Our brains are wired to recognize patterns, especially faces and bodies, even where none exist. This phenomenon, known as pareidolia, could explain some of the more fleeting Dogman sightings. When you're out in the woods or driving down a lonely road, your mind might interpret a shadowy figure as something far more terrifying than it actually is. But let's say you're not convinced by the idea of mistaken identity or trick of the light. What about mass hysteria? It's not as far-fetched as it sounds. When one person in a community reports seeing something strange, it can have a ripple effect. Others start to believe they've seen it too, or they become hyper-aware of every little noise and movement in the woods. Before you know it, you've got multiple sightings of the same creature, each one reinforcing the others. The power of suggestion is strong, and when it comes to cryptids, it's even stronger. People want to believe in the extraordinary, and sometimes that belief can create a reality of its own. Now, for those of you who prefer a more scientific explanation, there's the possibility of an undiscovered species. We're still discovering new species of animals all the time, particularly in remote and densely forested areas. It's not outside the realm of possibility that there could be a large, elusive predator out there that we simply haven't identified yet. Some researchers have suggested that the Dogman could be a remnant population of prehistoric creatures, such as the Amphicyonidae, also known as bear dogs, which roamed North America millions of years ago. While the idea of a surviving prehistoric predator sounds like something out of a B-movie, it's not entirely impossible. Nature has a way of surprising us. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The lack of concrete evidence, no bodies, no clear photos, no DNA, makes the undiscovered species theory a tough sell. The fact remains that despite decades of sightings and stories, we're still no closer to proving the existence of the Dogman than we were when those first reports started trickling in. So, where does that leave us? On the one hand, we have the skeptics, who argue that the Dogman is nothing more than a combination of misidentification, psychological factors, and perhaps a dash of folklore-fueled imagination. On the other hand, we have those who swear up and down that they've seen the creature with their own eyes, and they'll tell you that nothing, not even the most rational explanations, can shake their conviction. And then there's the middle ground. Those who are open to the possibility that there's more to this world than what we can see and measure. Maybe the Dogman isn't a flesh and blood creature in the traditional sense, but something else entirely. Something that science hasn't yet figured out how to classify. After all, we live in a world full of mysteries, and the boundaries of what we know are constantly being pushed. But before we start drifting too far into the realm of the unexplained, let's take a look at how the Dogman has made its way into popular culture, and what that says about us as a society. Spoiler alert, it's not just about scaring the pants off people. We've covered the origins, the sightings, the science, and the skepticism. Now let's talk about how the Dogman has clawed its way into popular culture. Because let's be real, no cryptid worth its fur can truly be considered legendary until it's made an impact on our books, movies, and even our memes. The Dogman might not have the same household name recognition as Bigfoot, but it's definitely earned its place in the pantheon of pop culture cryptids. And it all started, as so many modern legends do, with a little help from the media. Remember that DJ I mentioned earlier, Steve Cook? When he released his song The Legend in 1987, it was meant as an April Fool's joke, just a bit of spooky fun for his listeners. But when the flood of calls and letters came in, it was clear that people were taking the Dogman a lot more seriously. The song itself became a local hit, and suddenly the Dogman was more than just a scary story. It was a phenomenon. From there, the Dogman started to gain traction in the cryptid community, eventually making its way into documentaries, TV shows, and books dedicated to the strange and unexplained. Shows like Monster Quest and Finding Bigfoot began to feature episodes on the Dogman, treating it as a legitimate subject of investigation. And let's not forget the countless YouTube channels, podcasts, and blogs that have popped up over the years, each one eager to share the latest sighting or delve into the mystery of what this creature might be. But it's not just in the realm of documentaries and internet speculation that the Dogman has found a home. It's also made appearances in horror fiction, where it's often portrayed as the ultimate predator. A creature that's not just a physical threat, but a psychological one as well. Books like The Beast of Bray Road by Linda S. Godfrey and Dogman by Frank Holes Jr. have helped to cement the creature's status as a modern-day boogeyman, lurking just at the edge of our collective consciousness. Movies and TV shows, too, have dipped their toes into Dogman territory. While the creature hasn't yet had its own big-budget Hollywood debut, something I'm sure is just a matter of time, it's influenced the depiction of werewolves and other wolf-like monsters in media. The idea of a bipedal, wolf-headed creature has appeared in everything from horror films to video games, usually as an unstoppable force of nature that embodies our primal fears of the dark, the wild, and the unknown. And then there's the internet, where the Dogman has found a whole new audience. Social media has a way of breathing new life into old legends, and the Dogman is no exception. Stories, photos, and even videos purporting to show the creature have gone viral, sparking debates, memes, and even fan art. In the digital age, the Dogman has become more than just a cryptid. It's become a cultural symbol, a representation of the fears and fascinations that continue to drive us toward the unknown. But why has the Dogman captured our imagination so effectively? Part of it, I think, has to do with the creature's inherent duality. On the one hand, it's a monster, a predator that taps into our deepest fears of being hunted. On the other hand, it's also something vaguely human, a reminder that the line between man and beast is thinner than we'd like to admit. The Dogman isn't just scary because it's big and dangerous. It's scary because it forces us to confront the animal within ourselves. And let's not forget the thrill factor. People love a good scare, and the Dogman delivers. It's the kind of story you can't resist telling around the campfire, the kind of legend that makes you glance over your shoulder when you're out in the woods at night. It's that perfect blend of mystery and menace that keeps us coming back for more, even when we know, deep down, that it's probably just a story. But stories have power, and in the case of the Dogman, that power has grown over the years, turning a regional legend into a cryptid of national and even international interest. And who knows? Maybe that power is enough to bring the Dogman into the mainstream, right alongside Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster. After all, if there's one thing we've learned, it's that when it comes to the unknown, anything is possible. So, whether you're a believer, a skeptic, or somewhere in between, the Dogman has definitely made its mark. It's a reminder that even in our modern world of science and technology, there's still room for a little mystery and a little fear of what might be lurking just beyond the edge of the firelight. But before you start thinking we've reached the end of our Dogman discussion, let me remind you that the real power of these stories lies in sharing them, which brings us to our final segment, the outro, where I'll wrap things up and give you a few thoughts to chew on. But don't worry, I won't leave you hanging for too long. We're almost there. And that, my friends, brings us to the end of another episode of Broadcasting Seeds. We've ventured through the dark forests of North America, explored the mysterious origins of the Dogman, listened to the chilling accounts of those who've encountered this creature, and even compared it to the legendary Sasquatch. We've weighed the scientific explanations, dipped our toes into skepticism, and examined how this cryptid has embedded itself in our popular culture. But before we wrap things up, let's take a moment to reflect on what all of this means. Whether you believe in the Dogman or not, the stories we tell about creatures like this say a lot about us as a society. They tap into our fears, our fascinations, and our desire to find meaning in the unexplained. They remind us that no matter how much we think we know, there's always something out there, lurking just beyond the edge of our understanding. So, whether you're a hardcore cryptid enthusiast or just someone who loves a good mystery, I hope this episode has sparked a little curiosity in you. Maybe it's made you think twice about what might be out there in the woods. Or maybe it's just given you a good story to share with friends next time you're sitting around the campfire. Either way, I want to thank you for tuning in to Broadcasting Seeds. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and leave a review. Your support helps us keep digging into the strange, the unexplained, and the downright bizarre. And who knows what we'll uncover next. And hey, if you've got a Dogman story of your own or any other strange encounter, drop me a line. I'd love to hear from you. You never know, your story might just be the seed for our next episode. Until next time, stay curious, stay skeptical, and remember, the world is full of mysteries, and it's up to us to keep exploring them.
I got bad thoughts that make my mind scared, hold me hostage and they don't fight fair. Who gon' pray for me and wipe on my tears? Who gon' save me if you not right here? Move this darkness and make my sight clear. Take me your way cause I don't like here. Ghosts of my past, they filling the night air. Wake me up, I'm trapped in my nightmares. Trapped in my nightmares. Drowning, I'm off the deep end. Apparitions of all my demons. All my thoughts are committing treason. All alone, who gon' hear me screaming? Manifestations of my fears, regrets that stretched out for light years. Can almost touch the light, homie, it's right there. Body free but trapped in my nightmares. Wake me up, don't let me drown. All the lights are